retired from Boston's Department of Neighborhood Development, was my last professional gig. Still involved in community development struggles in Cambridge and Boston, and still doing community development work in Nicaragua. We started this public banking effort in Massachusetts. I think it was 5 or 6 years ago. We finally filed legislation. I unfortunately didn't bring it up, at least. That stuff over there is about our effort. We certainly have H 935 in the House and S 549 in the Senate. This is the second session that we've filed legislation to create a public state bank in Massachusetts. As was mentioned, the only one that's a sort of full-scale state bank is the one in North Dakota that was created in 1919 and still operates today. It's a century old this year and has a sterling record of low-interest community development and individual financing in the state of North Dakota. And so we wanted to have the basic idea of a public bank. By the way, 40% of the banks in the world are publicly owned banks. They're owned by government entities. It's the U.S., as we're learning more and more all the time, is the odd country out, right? You know, it's not doing what a lot of countries are doing in the world. Germany, for example, has this incredibly strong network of regional publicly owned banks that do all kinds of things at a lower cost and greater benefit for the people of the country. The basic idea is that now the public deposits in the state of Massachusetts, the regular working capital deposits, are in the money center banks, you know, Bank of America, Citizens, Santander, and so on. And they can use that money, that deposit money of municipalities and of the state agencies themselves for anything they want. They can use that money to back investment in anything, anywhere in the world, including some of the crazier financing mechanisms that have been created in the last couple of decades. If we had a public bank, then we would take, in North Dakota, basically all of the state deposits are in the public bank and a lot of municipal deposits. Our legislation would just start off with something in the neighborhood, if 15% of the working capital deposits that the state has, around $350 million would be deposited in the public bank, and $50 million probably from the state and city, cooperating cities that participate with the state. And the pension fund would be loaned to form the capital of the bank. The way a bank works, it's magic. You know, your deposit goes in the bank. The bank doesn't loan your money out. Your money stays in your account. But your money backs the invention of money. And when a bank loans money, it creates money out of thin air. And when the loan is repaid, the money disappears. And if you look at a bank's books, the only money they make is money on the interest that's paid. They don't make money on giving principal or getting principal back. And it's because the security of having all these deposits on hand for a quick emergency seems to make all of this work, and it's really quite something. So the point is now we have a whole bunch of quasi-publics in Massachusetts that are wonderful. Mass Housing Finance Agency, for example, is one of them. We have all kinds of things that are great public housing. We get money from the feds that we don't have to pay back. We can use for housing loans and things like that. But all of the programs that we have now, it's just based on the money that's appropriated. If you get $50 million, you want to use it for affordable housing, you loan it out, and you're done. You can't do anything else until that $50 million is repaid, or you get another $50 million voted for another appropriation. With a bank, a public bank, You take that same $50 million, you capitalize the bank with it, you put in $350 million of public deposits, and you can make $400 million in loans. You can loan out 8 times as much money with the same $50 million. You can leverage your money and get 8 times as much bang for the buck if you have a publicly owned bank than all of the mechanisms that we are now using through the government to create affordable housing. It's, you get the money, you spend it once it's gone. You can't use the magic of fractional lending that a bank proposes. It's an absolute no-brainer to expand the public realm. So how do you do this? Well, efforts are going on in at least 20 states and at least 10 municipalities to set up public banks. Somehow it's catching on, which is fantastic. That means that 1 or 2 of us are going to actually have one before too long. It seems like, you know, it's bubbling up. I don't remember. I think we have 30 co-sponsors right now. We had 20, something like that, last session. I'm looking for people here who would like to talk to me afterward, and we want to set up meetings and coordinate with people like this guy right here and others in the state legislature. We need to meet with mayors to get mayors to advocate for the creation of a public bank. Now, we decided what we want the bank to do all kinds of things, including affordable housing. But when you're establishing a new institution, you have to identify a clear need. You have to make it simple. You have to pick some little strategy you think will win, and then you build on it afterwards. Well, we decided that our best shot right now was to start off as a public infrastructure bank, because cities and towns all over the state are having a hard time financing their infrastructure. They're postponing their infrastructure projects. The investment banking community that underwrites the bonds that are used for public infrastructure would only lend up to 6% of the, if the towns, all of their debt service exceeded 6% of their budget, it wouldn't loan them any money for more infrastructure projects. And a lot of cities and towns aren't really very adept at dealing with the investment banking community. So we surveyed a bunch of cities and towns, got favorable responses from mayors about, yeah, we're having trouble, we could use some additional assistance, some lower interest in financing infrastructure. And the infrastructure could be anything, the environmental, agricultural, not just sewer lines and whatever, you know, all kinds of infrastructure to be included. And then the idea was to see if we could get the bank established on that basis and then branch out. And one thing we'd love to do is student loans, low interest student loans. You know, public higher education was affordable in this state until about 20 years ago, and then the tuition fees goes up. The Bank of North Dakota, over its entire life, almost its entire life, devoted about 1/4 of its portfolio to individual student loans at 2% interest. We'd love to do that. We'd love the bank to be involved. Find a niche, which will be difficult in affordable housing, because we already have probably the fullest palette of institutions to support affordable housing of any state in the country. But and we want to strengthen community banks, because we want to weaken money center banks. This reflects a lot of stuff that people have been saying about the bigger thinking or creative thinking. You know, if we had a bunch of state banks, then that's a lot of money that would not be controlled by Bank of America and so on. And in places, at least the control is within your state. At least you have some control over what happens, of what activity your money backs. At least you can vote for people who will be running this state-controlled bank. But we thought we'd have a better shot of getting it established. We just started with the infrastructure aspect, because we think we've identified a need that speaks to a fairly burning issue of most of the municipalities in the state right now. And then the Bank of North Dakota, it's fascinating. They do a lot of their activities through state-owned banks, community banks. They have the strongest community banking sector in the country. They have the lowest rate of takeover by the big banks. You know how all the banks are getting bought up and consolidated.
Which state?
North Dakota. We would like to strengthen the community banking sector. And so our bill says that we're not going to compete with existing banks. We want to partner with existing Massachusetts-based banks, and we will do partnership lending with them. We will issue letters of credit to support their activities. We will do all kinds of things with them at their invitation. If a bank, right now, little community banks, they can't do all kinds of mid-range size commercial lending. They don't have the capacity. But if they partnered with a public bank, then they would have the capacity to make these larger loans, and they could make fees off of administering the loans. There was a wonderful 2014 data set, and that I compared the 189 North Dakota state-based banks to the 149 Massachusetts state-based banks in 2014, and the profitability of the North Dakota banks was double the profitability of the Massachusetts state banks. And we think one of the reasons is because of the partnership that they have. So the point is, there's different things that a publicly owned state bank can do, different ways it can go. It seems like a no-brainer given the interest of people in this room. Right now, the only people who are directly stepping on their toes is the investment bankers, because we would be cutting into their infrastructure financing market. They got wind of us last year, and so they instantly raised this limit of 6% of the community. They won't give you a loan for infrastructure in your town if you're above 6% debt service. They raised it to 7% because of us, and because they're trying to take our argument away from us. And they said they might be willing to raise it again later. But that's because that's the only community that this current formulation sort of directly threatens in any way, and they're the only community that has come out so far sort of in opposition. Anyway, that's the effort that we're working on, and if people, and it's apparently very similar to the green bank that we're going to hear about. And I was unaware of the fact that the idea here is also to have a real bank. Most like the Connecticut Green Bank is not a real green bank. It's a revolving loan fund. You get the money once, the $50 million, you spend it, and you're done until it's either repaid or you get another appropriation. But with a real bank structure, you get the same $50 million, you can do $400 million of activity. That's the difference between getting a real public bank and the kind of mechanisms that we've been using in the public sphere so far. So
let's just have a few like points of information kind of questions rather than a discussion. So if you have specific questions for Richard.
Can you explain how credit unions fit into the picture you just described?
Well, credit unions are, they make loans, they take deposits and make loans to members. They can function as a bank and have the same advantage, but that's just what they do. That's, see, the state bank, as we're proposing here, and as the Bank of North Dakota functions, will take no deposits from an individual or a private entity. The only deposits would be state money and city money, state and city working capital. And no loans would be made to individuals. This would not be for home mortgages or, this is for public money used for public activities, public economic
So it wouldn't affect credit unions in any way?
No, I don't think so. Well, not that I know of at this point.
Related, what's your definition of a community bank then? Is that based on asset
Well,
size or?
in the sense that I just used, it's nothing other than a bank that's owned in the state.
That's owned in the state?
Yeah, I mean, that's not a decent definition of a public bank, but the data set that I used, that was,
Yeah, no, that's fine, I just wanted to.
but the idea is local, what we really mean is local banks that serve a small geographical area
Mhm.
and are more personally involved and aware of the communities in which they operate.
Go ahead.
I just wanted to clarify, with the current pending legislation, is that actually laying out some system to actually create a like state-funded, state-operated public bank, or is that just like sort of enabling
No,
this?
no,
just
the
like enabling
legislation would actually create the bank.
Okay.
It would require the state to capitalize the bank with $50 million as a long-term loan, and then it would require the state to deposit, start off with this minimum amount of about $350 million of public deposits in the bank. And then hopefully it works. The state says, oh, this is good, we'll deposit more, a higher percentage of a deposit, and then cities and towns will begin to deposit their money as well in the public bank.
Curious to know what the state treasury has how they have reacted to the idea.
Speak louder, we can't hear you.
Curious to know how the state treasury has
The previous
reacted.
state treasurer indicated a lukewarm attitude to the bank. The current state treasurer has indicated that she's not particularly interested, but willing to talk about it some more.
Even more things in Vermont have happened.
Well, Vermont almost, yeah.
Yeah.
Just a PS on credit unions, are you, for a little while, on board of the local Franklin First one?
Yeah.
I'm not sure about all of them, so, but they can't do commercial loans.
Yeah, right.
So that's a big problem. I mean,
Mhm.
I don't know, and, you know, they have very strict limits on how much they can loan at all.
Yes.
I just want to know what, usually the interest rate on a loan reflects the level of risk. And a public infrastructure bank has a much different profile for risk than a loan coming from a commercial bank. How are you going to make the loan decisions to protect the money that presumably is pension money, it's deposits, you know, all
Yes.
that stuff?
Yes.
How are you going to make sure that the loans are going to be good loans?
Just like any other bank that does, I mean, you know, the legislation includes who appoints the board that oversees the bank, and it stipulates a few of required positions in the bank, and a little bit about the skills and background of the people who would occupy those positions. It has a really weak provision for public input. What we'd really like to see is a bank that actually requires democratic elections but you can't do it all at once.
Any other clarity?
And by the way, banks aren't perfect, right? I mean, we love most everything that the Bank of North Dakota did, but for environmentalists, it's a little tough. Because from 2002 to 2010, about a third of their portfolio was, you know, fracking polluted, you know, unfortunately. Making North Dakota.
It's hard to get
More,
along
and
with
then
that
we'll
too.
move on.
And just to wrap up this credit union conversation, could they be considered one of the locally owned community banks? Could they be in that category?
I don't think so, because as was said, they just make loans to their individual members. And the idea of the public bank would be to only make loans that affect the public, or, you know, not an individual person, but
I was
some
referring,
group of them.
I was referring to the supports that you were talking about, this public bank offering to community banks that were locally
I
owned?
don't think so.
No.
But I mean, maybe there is a way, but at the moment, I don't.
Last one?
There's two questions. One is the public bank, can the public bank do fractional reserve lending?
Yes, that's the whole point.
Can-
That's why for the same $50 million, you can get 8 times as much activity.
I thought it required the additional investment. Secondly, are the local community banks in support of this?
Not yet, because they don't know about it. We're really behind the 8 ball in our outreach to the community banks, yes. But they're bound to, the local ones are bound to end up liking it because it's written to improve their profits, basically. So they'd be pretty stupid not to like it.
Last, quick one?
Is the only money coming to the public bank is from state taxes? Is that the only source?
I guess so.
Municipal.
State funds would capitalize the bank as a loan. And then state deposits, like, you know, the state deposits $50 million in this account that it has to access every day to pay payroll. It deposits $1 million in that, you know, all of these accounts, some of that money would be deposited in the public bank instead of in the Bank of America, but it would still serve the same function that it serves now in the Bank of America.
Okay. Yeah, that was my understanding from reading about the LA attempt at Citibank, is that all the state employee payroll money would go into that bank. It would process it, and therefore it would do away with a lot of the fees that they have to pay to, you know, private investment banks.
Yes.
They would use the payroll as
That's part of the model. It's a
Yeah.
much less costly bank to operate.
Okay, so I'd like to introduce Ivan Ussach, who's from Common Good and has a presentation.
Thanks, Judy. Hi, everybody. I'm going to start by saying I've lived in Franklin County for a dozen years now, and being originally from New York City, I fell in love with it for many reasons, which I'm sure most of you are familiar with. One of the other great things about Franklin County is that it's where the Common Good payment system has been successfully piloted for the last 4 years. And I'm going to use our...
Forgive me,
Yes,
I'm
of course.
sorry. I'm passing around, we used to call ourselves Hub Public Banking because we started off with a Boston bank idea instead of State Bank, but it's the state group. And if you're interested in getting on our mailing list, please sign up. I'm sorry.
That's
for the
okay.
interruption.
I'm going to try to remember what I was going to say. Love Franklin County pilot. Oh, yes, I was saying I'm going to use our soon-to-be released, much improved website to kind of guide you through a basic presentation of Common Good in terms of what it basically is, how it basically works. Can I see a show of hands, those of you who have at least heard of Common Good, even if you're not quite sure what it is? Great. And can I see a show of hands of those of you who might actually be members?
Wow.
Decent show of hands, great, okay. So hopefully the technology will cooperate and we'll move right through this.
It's a smart board, you could probably just tap the website and stand up there.
What's that now?
You can just stand by the board and tap it with your finger. You don't need to stand behind the
really?
board. Yeah.
Okay, I've never used a smart board before.
Yeah, just try it and just click on sign in or whatever.
Okay.
With your finger right here.
That's fine. I don't need to sign in,
Smart
but
parts
we'll
are
start
too
with,
expensive,
we'll
so
start with this great test. This is the new website, it's not live yet, we will have it released soon. I thought it would be good to start by talking about, in some ways, what this whole system is about. We refer to it as the payment card or the payment system for economic democracy. It's really not just to have another way to buy broccoli at the supermarket. It's not a payment system because the world needs another payment system. The reason it's the payment system for economic democracy is that as people make transactions and buy goods and services from local businesses, funds accumulate in a local community fund that community members can decide together how and where to invest in their local community. So what I wanted to start with, this is the new website's going to be designed, stuff for members, stuff for businesses, and stuff for community. Look at that. New and recent projects, investments. Now, how do you scroll?
Right-hand side. See where I'm pointing?
Grab the,
Same
the
same
drag
as
to
if
drag.
you were on-
Same as if you, okay. So the first round of community funding for Common Good Greenfield, which is basically Common Good in Franklin County, happened in 2017. $10,000 were funded for mostly grants and a few loans of local businesses. Those decisions were all made by members who voted after discussing various projects, and a year later, the community was able to do its second round of funding at the end of 2019. $20,000, actually $19,000, were funded, again, mostly grants, but an increasing number of loans and investments. And proposals were solicited through various means. Basically, anyone could submit a proposal for just about anything. And then we had a committee who vetted proposals and then put out those that seemed to have the right, to meet the criteria, were put out to the membership to vote on, and the amounts of money, and we ended up voting for a variety of projects, mostly, well not mostly, basically in 5 overlapping fields: arts, sustainability, small business support, food, and social justice.
I'm sorry. Next to the X in the top right-hand corner is a box. Next to the X, to the left. Pick that box. Yeah.
Okay, thanks for the help. So it's kind of a mix of things. Some of these projects overlap in several categories. Just Roots this year received money to support local food clinic. Previously, they had received a grant for subsidizing family food shares for low-income residents. Health-related activity, several projects targeting young people. This is an internship at Seeds of Solidarity Farm in Orange. Arts-related projects, Music of Franklin provides musical training and performance for young people. We actually were one of several people who helped to put this conference, not to put it on, but we provided some level of support. I suppose you'd call that probably the social justice category if you were trying to categorize it. Gardens, literacy projects, and so on and so forth. Here's some of the others. The Compost Co-op is a cooperative of worker owners who are supporting people who have been incarcerated and are now looking to develop a sustainable economic business model. We actually had some folks from Compost Co-op talking at our monthly gathering the other night, and it was really informative to hear them talk about their work. So that's just an idea to kind of what is it that we're really about. People tend to think of us as a payment system, but like I said, the uniqueness of the system, as far as we can tell, is that we've been able to develop a system that does actually generate financial resources that local members can invest. And I'm going to take you through how it works using a very simple schematic, and I'm going to hope that it doesn't, at the risk of kind of simplifying things, I hope I'll get the main point across, and then of course you may have questions later. So here's the main screen. Let's go to how it works. Scroll down. This is what your basic Common Good member card looks like that you can take to local merchants. You can also, if you're somebody buying something at Baker's, There's over 50 businesses in the Franklin County area, mostly in Greenfield. It's a lot of the supermarkets like Foster's and Greenfield Co-op. It's restaurants like Mesa Verde and the People's Pint. It's co-ops like ABC and Real Pickles, and it's some health-related businesses, dentists, and so on. And there's a list of all the businesses that you can find on the website. This is our attempt to create a simple graphic that basically explains what happened. And I'll understand that, you know, it may raise more questions than it generates, but hopefully it'll really give you an idea of what's happening. There are various ways that people can exchange dollars for common good credit. Most people choose to connect their account to a checking account, and either whenever they feel like it or automatically they can transfer some amount. Let's say they put $50 on their common good card. Their common good account now has $50. You can now go to Foster's or the Co-op and you can buy $50 worth of groceries. The Co-op now has $50 worth of common good credit that it just got from your transaction, and you can use that common good credit to pay its suppliers, like, as actually happens in the real world, Artisan Beverage Cooperative or Real Pickles or others. And or the company can pay its employees who choose to become common good members some portion of their wages if the employee agrees to that. Of course, it's totally optional. Those employees and vendors can then turn around and use that same common good credit to make purchases at other businesses, and so we have economic circles that are continuing with the credits circulating. Ultimately, the success of the program is to expand those economic circles so that ultimately all of the transactions are happening with the common good credit. Well, what happened to the $50 that came into the system? That's what goes into the community fund here. And eventually, over time, as transactions increase and more members and businesses join the system, the community fund rises to a fairly significant level of money, depending on what you call significant. And in the first round of voting, to use the practical example of what happened in Greenfield in 2017, when we reached $50,000 in the community fund, members started to have a serious discussion about, is there some safe amount of money that can be invested locally? And by looking at the economic behavior of the system, because all of the data is transparent and available on the website to any member, it was very obvious that, you know, if you're a person, but especially if you're a company and you've got a bunch of common good credit in your account and you've already paid you've already spent all the common good credit you can. You've paid the businesses that accept common good credit, you've paid your employees, and you need to cash out your remaining common good credit for cash. You can do that whenever you want. We just encourage businesses and people to use their common good credit where they can. But at any time, people are free to exchange common good credit back to dollars. So what we saw is, if you look at the graph of the activity in the system, in any given month, the amount of money that was cashed out was under $10,000. So the thinking was, there's $50,000 in the system. We're never really spending more than $10,000 in any period of time. We think we can safely invest $10,000. So the community got together and we had discussions, and we ended up voting, and we made the decision to spend $10,000 and invest it on grants and loans for businesses. What was really important, as we had expected, was with the increase in activity, the community fund recovered rather quickly, and within several months had once again grown beyond $50,000, showing that, as reflecting some of the comments that have been made by Richard, and also you made a really interesting comment in the broadband panel that I may mention later. But the idea that as you spend money and invest in the community, you end up having a positive impact on the overall economy. So that's what happened again last year. We had $100,000 in the community fund. we spent $20,000, and within several months, the community fund had actually surpassed $100,000 because of increased activity in the system, more members, more purchases. And I think today the number is something like $140,000. Any member can see all of this information. The system is totally transparent. So that's basically how the system works in a nutshell. I realize it's somewhat simplistic. I wanted to just say a little bit about, again, where is all of this activity happening? Greenfield, Franklin County was the first area to develop this system. Since then, there are several communities in the Midwest that have slowly but steadily been building out the system. We now have one in Indiana and one in Michigan that have been functioning for a few years now. More importantly, our strategy has been to really strengthen the system and expand within the Pioneer Valley. So after several years of putting the pieces together, we have now started to really make a push in the Northampton, Amherst, Hampshire County area, and I'm very happy to say that just in the last few months, we've added about a dozen businesses, some of them fairly prominent, not like the huge retailers yet, but I'm also happy to say that we are very close to landing what I think will be an anchor grocery store business in that area, and I hope that we can actually announce something really soon. So the point being, things are growing slowly but steadily. Northampton, Amherst is going to become another community, and that's kind of the direction that things are going. We're contacted all the time from people all over the country. They want to start a common good community, or they think they do, and what is common good anyway? And we do everything we can to support those people, but we have really tried to adhere to the priority of strengthening and building out the Pioneer Valley, because we really want to get it right here. And we want to show that we can grow the model, and then you can have everything from Springfield in the south of the Pioneer Valley up to Brattleboro in the northern end of the Pioneer Valley, being several common good communities where if you're a member of any of those communities, you can buy and sell with any businesses and people in those communities. And so that's where we're headed, and I have, shall I say, cautious optimism to believe that we're going to get there. Things are taking a little bit longer than we would like, but that's probably how things usually go. And so I guess I'll finish my presentation, again, because I realize this is just sort of a condensed version, by the vision is really a rather profound vision that this type of community power, and by community power we mean that local people in the community have access to financial resources that the local people can invest and decide where to invest in the community. That's what economic democracy means to us. I think it's what I'm hearing when I hear a lot of the comments made by some of the other participants talking about, we don't want the big banks and big government to be, and big corporations to be controlling our lives to the tremendous extent that we do that now. How do we find another way to do this? So the goal, as ambitious as it may sound, is that as we grow steadily over the next few years, to have more and more communities and have the common good economy become a much larger portion of the local economy and the regional economy, and then, I guess if we're fortunate and lucky, maybe the national economy. Well, what would that look like? That would mean that in Greenfield and Franklin County, maybe half of the people in the county were members. Maybe the city of Greenfield would be using common good to do financial transactions for people who are making various payments, et cetera, et cetera. So that's the vision, and I'll stop there. Thanks very much. I have some propaganda here I'm happy to lead.
Just a quick clarifying question, so we'll move on to follow Mark. Yep.
One question is, excuse me.
I was just wondering if you could talk a little bit about covering administrative costs to run Common Good and financial services charges, and how that works in this model.
Some really good pieces that, of course, I left out. First of all, there are no fees to any participants in the system, especially for businesses. No credit card fees is one of the major selling points. The system is run by a nonprofit organization that has to date existed primarily on donations by members who join the system and can make an optional donation. We wanted to keep it optional, although most new members do choose to make a donation. There are features like Roundup on your purchases that also contribute to supporting administrative costs. The financial model for sustainability is to reach several thousand members, at which point we have roughly determined that the amount of money coming in will cover the administrative costs. We're also exploring some other income streams so that we're not totally dependent on donations. For example, all of that money sitting in the community fund right now, $137, is sitting in some bank account in Greenfield making 0.2% interest. It might as well be getting nothing. That money could potentially be invested into higher yielding revenue that would be supporting good social causes, what have you. There'd have to be some criteria there. So that could be a very strong area for improving the financial sustainability that we're looking at, and there are some other things.
Here.
I hope I answered your question.
Yeah, thank you.
Yeah, just quick, how do you see this addressing poverty?
Well, that's a great question. I don't want to pretend that I have some real simple answer to that. The system is really designed to do what the community, to be a vehicle for community members to put their money where their mouth is, if you will. So the assumption is, as roughly seen by what's been funded to date, members have chosen to fund projects that support health care for people who may not have sufficient resources, arts programming, food access. So if there was, for example, just quickly, $10 million in the community fund, the community could choose to either grant or loan some sizable portion of those funds to businesses, organizations, nonprofits, what have you, who are working to address those various issues of poverty.
Is that a majority vote?
That is the answer is yes, it is a majority vote, but it's more than that. It's a vote that has a weighting system so that it's not just the person who it's not just whoever gets the top number of votes.
Ranked choice voting.
Thank you. That's ranked choice voting, so it's it's a bit more, it's a bit fair.
I could help you with that question.
Yeah, good.
We're working with Co-op Power. We've got 300 families, low-income families that we're looking to sign up with Common Good to pay for their subscription solar. And working with the organizations in those low-income communities, they're kind of reading all about Common Good, studying it, and one of the things they think is most exciting about it is the cash flow assistance. Like you build up a certain amount of credit over time. And so if your paycheck's coming on Friday and you need food on Thursday, you can still use your Common Good card to pay for your food. So that's one of the things.
Overdraft protection, essentially?
Yeah, but it doesn't cost anything.
It gets rid of the payday.
And you're basically borrowing that money from the community, so the expectation is you would pay it back,
What if you don't?
sooner rather than later. Well, if you don't, then that becomes a liability on the overall finances of the community, and the community has to have some fund or resources to cover that. It hasn't been an issue so far, but it's something we're definitely aware of. Yeah.
All right, there's too many questions.
I'll let you
So I want to move to Paul Mark, so he can get these. Just time, and then we'll open it up.
You get involved.
No, go ahead. I'll turn this off so you're not.
Thank you. So this is the complete opposite of the broadband. We actually have the internet.
Right.
Oh my God. So Paul Mark, state representative for Greenfield and 15 other communities in Berkshire and Franklin County. Glad to be here. I am the lead sponsor of a bill very similar called the Green Bank Bill. And these two gentlemen have done a great job talking about the concept of public banking and all of that works. So I'll be more specific. The Green Bank varies in that it exists for a specific purpose. It exists to try to promote investment in green infrastructure projects, that kind of thing. And I'll give you a little bit of the history. In 2014, there was a bill out there to put into place what's called PACE. And PACE is a bonding system that allows the state to help loan money to finance renewable energy projects. When people from Green and Greenfield, one of my favorite organizations, came to me and made me aware of this, we noticed a flaw in the bill. It allowed for natural gas to be considered clean energy infrastructure. And so I went to the Senate sponsor at the time and I said, huh, you think we could take that part out? And I'd love to help work with you on this bill. And he's like, no, that's clean energy, we're sticking with gas. Okay, so I didn't want to file the exact same thing and compete with him because that's kind of a stupid thing to do and it would just cause probably neither concept to ever pass. So we looked through different models that were happening that we found was this green bank idea that was happening in Connecticut and New York, Maryland, Hawaii, a couple of other places. And we worked with House Counsel, we worked with the other states, and we came up with language that was a suitable starting point to try to find a way to get legislation to pass the same thing here in Massachusetts. And over the last couple of sessions, some of the political problems that we've encountered were, first of all, the startup costs. So we figure somewhere between 50 and 200 million would be a great place to start to get this bank, as was discussed, its initial infusion so we can start lending money and start having repayments and start showing successes. Obviously, anytime you go to the legislature, whether it's state, federal, or even city level, and you start asking for money, it gets a little more tougher, and people are reluctant to give out money. We've had really good interactive sessions. We've done briefings down at the State House. We've had hearings at the Telecom Committee that considers this bill. We've even brought both Speaker DeLeo and the chair of Telecom out here. And he rode the little trolley, and he had a really nice day, and he was really impressed with it, what he saw. We're hoping in this session we're going to have another briefing in a couple of weeks down at the State House. People from Greenfield are going to come in and assist me with that. And we're hoping that maybe there'll be a little more traction. But what Richard's doing is a good step. He talked about it's only the second session that this has been filed. So believe it or not, the legislature moves very slowly. It was founded in 1780 and it moves at a 1780 pace. And so when we're considering ideas, what's important is, thank you for laughing. What's important is little meetings like this, developing more support for an idea, developing support for a concept. And so when we talk about, as we were talking about in broadband, trying to take back our communities, trying to get off of national and international models, trying to make ourselves self-sufficient and renewable and having our own education, financing, jobs, agriculture that we can control. It's a slow process, but it has to start somewhere. And there's allies that we can find all over the state and all over this country. So it's great that we're having a session here where I'm already lead sponsor. That's wonderful. But at some point, we're going to have to expand into some other areas and try to convince them as well, because I think this was noted when talking about the Dakotas. Yes, it's working well in North Dakota, the public bank idea, but you know what's working really well also in South Dakota is they have the lowest standards of any state. And so all kinds of banks come there and want to be headquartered in South Dakota. And credit cards, you ever notice your credit card maybe is from a bank in South Dakota? That's because they cut corners. So both models work. It's just who do they work for?
Right.
Those models work for people that are going to line their pockets, whereas these models ideally will work for people that are in our communities and will benefit from having these things available. And so in Massachusetts specifically, where we have such an urbanized, I think, financial services heavy, biomedical heavy, and education heavy eastern part of the state, it's important for people to realize that, yeah, that's going well right now. Remember the last recession. Remember what happened last time. So every 8 years when there's a recession, we shouldn't be reliant on these international banks that have no concern and are going to pull out of here the first chance they get. And then again, just the specifics. With environmental projects, there's a very different set of criteria that needs to be used for the success of an environmental project. And a bank that is worried about how many billions can we make this quarter, that's their primary focus. They're answering to stockholders, they're answering to different people than a green bank, a public bank would answer to. With a green bank, you hope that. Now, you never want to put up a bank that's just going to be not even a bank. It's just a handout. That's what we're looking for, a handout to environmental projects. We're looking for a bank that will have a focus based on how do we help make these projects successful, and how do we let that green, renewable energy economy be unleashed by both private and public support. So I know we're already short in time, so we're gonna wrap that up and get into questions and discussion.
Yeah. Okay.
So, I have a question. Is this, a couple of questions. I don't know anything about the green bank model that you're putting forward, so I'm,
Neither do I.
excuse me, my ignorance. I do know a lot about public banking.
Great.
So you haven't called this a public bank, you called it a green bank, and I assume that's purposeful. And that's the heart of the question. So this is not necessarily a bank, from my understanding, the way that you just described it, that is focused on a community and reinvests in a community. This is about expanding renewable energy.
Yes.
Now, if this is, my question is this, so this is related to the Green New Deal?
Sure.
It is? Okay.
No, this predates the Green New Deal.
Okay,
Yeah.
so my concern about this has to do with my concern about the Green New Deal. I read the draft, I read the legislation, I know what's in it. And what I'm most concerned about with the Green New Deal is it takes away local control. It basically destroys local sovereignty. And so I'm concerned about that aspect. And when you apply it to, could you expand that about the idea about how this is a public bank?
Sure, yeah.
If it is, and how it differs specifically?
Yeah,
That's my question.
the idea is that it is publicly chartered for a purpose. So it's a bank, but its focus is not on a million different things. Its focus is specifically on promoting renewable and green energy. In state level, there would be a state level bank, it would be a public-private partnership. To start, it would be public, but indeed, any local banks or investors could start getting involved, but the focus would be about energy. And the idea for that is to unleash the job creation and the local job creation potential. So I don't see where the Green
there's no
Deal really
local control though, there's no
there is,
imperative to put the money
because
back
the
into.
board of directors would be appointed by the governor. It would be, as a Massachusetts chartered bank, it's not a bank that could take $50 million from the state and then 2 years later, merge with Santana.
But the investors in that bank could then use that money to their own purpose by
And so
investing in renewable
that's
energy
where
in
there
Massachusetts.
is intentional
That's what I'm
vagueness. The
Yeah.
intentional vagueness is
Please.
to get through the legislative process, you need a magic number of 81. You have to have a majority. And in reality, you'd like to have about 110 because you want to have a veto-proof majority. In the Senate, same thing, but the numbers are 21 and 34. So in order to get a consensus with legislation, you're usually better off being very flexible and trying to find out, so how can we actually fit this somewhere? So to me, the part I've been focusing on the least up to this point has been like, where will it be physically located? And I'm trying to keep my hands in who is appointed as part of the governing structure, because I think that's important to what you're saying. We don't want this to turn into, yeah, this is a green bank, and the board of directors is the Bank of America guy, and yeah. But with the formation, with the formation of the legislation, to me, what usually works better is you keep things flexible, and then as it gets traction, which you hope it will actually do, when you need to fight back and push back and make sure you're keeping control, you do so. And where someone has an idea that's a good idea and maybe gets 30 more votes, you say, okay, I can live with Southeastern Cape Cod Credit Union person having a voice in this, that kind of thing.
You give the bill number before?
Sure. No, I didn't give it, I can tell you.
So, questions.
H2894.
Are you guys competing politically? And, I mean, they can both happen and we can support both. How do you feel about that? I'd like to hear both of you on that. My question for you, Representative Marks, is one source of private capital that have you approached the insurance companies? Because they're the huge, they get wiped every time there's one of these 500-year storms that come through every year now. And they're sitting on that. It seems like they might want to invest a little piece of change in a green bank that would stop things.
Right. I believe you actually emailed me about this. I think we had an email correspondence. It was either you or someone else on your exact same bill.
Mhm.
Yeah, talking about how we could partner at some point to get this
We,
numbers
we,
on.
we have to get together and decide on our strategy.
Do so we can back you.
Yes.
Very-
But that's the thing, with 200 members of the legislature, sometimes there are duplicate good ideas, and then you try to form alliances. And the other part of your question, yeah, that's a great idea. Pensions, labor unions, that kind of thing, especially IBW, electrical workers, that I think have
Churches.
interest. Sorry, Ben?
Ethical.
Churches.
Ethical
Churches,
values,
right.
churches.
But insurance
No,
companies have a huge, they're sitting on it, and they've got
Universities.
Anybody that wants ethical investments, basically.
Very,
I have a question, and I'm not sure where this falls in any of this, but I see a need for something along the lines of what's done in some European countries of postal banking. In other words, services for individuals.
Postal banking.
Yes, services for individuals, and the closest thing we've heard here is common good, but that's not the same, you know, it's different. Postal banking meaning banking services that are offered to anybody who wants them, to individuals, basically. And that solves the problem of underserved communities. It solves the problem of availability of capital in the form of small loans to individuals and businesses. There's a huge gap between where you can start to get a loan from a commercial bank, and also the kind of initiatives that you're talking about, which are, you know, big dollar numbers, and you know, and the kind of things that people need, $100, $500, $1,000 to get them started on something. And I think that common good is like trying to kind of fill that need. But are there any initiatives that you're aware of to actually make that sort of thing happen in Massachusetts or in the U.S.?
One is that there is legislation, I don't know where it is or what's happening, to reinstate postal banking. I have no idea what its backing is or what its chances are, but when was it that we had postal banking in the United States? I forget when it was shut down, but we used to have postal banking, and that would be great. And I don't think it obviates any of the other things that we're talking about.
No, I mean, exactly, it's another need.
So, I mean, one of the really critical things is that the scientific studies say we have 12 years. Where are we going to get the enormous amount of capital that we need to raise to make a huge transition to green energy? And so this is not a time when we can wait for like 25 years to build local banking. This is a time when we have to start thinking very strategically about where are you putting how many people in here actually have money in a regular bank being invested in, you know, whatever. Raise your hand, be honest.
Probably almost.
Okay. How many people are paying insurance to insurance companies that are investing their money in things you wish they were not?
Well, you have to assume all that.
You know, you just have to start thinking outside the box. And I think for green banks, you look at New York, which is our neighbor, the taxpayers experienced the meltdown that happened from one huge hurricane in New York City. They put $1 billion into their green bank. Green banks are attracting 5 to 10 times as much private investment as they're getting public investment. So we just have to think outside the box, and that's one reason why this green bank thing is up there, and we're trying to get more traction. Because and the Green New Deal is a great opportunity. It's got some PR behind it. Finally, we're getting an ear about climate change, but we just don't have a lot of time.
I forget when it was. It might have been 2011. There was a flood in one of the rivers up there in North Dakota, and it was devastating. And there were other communities downstream, just like happened the last couple of weeks, that were very badly affected. And the Bank of North Dakota accomplished within 1 year what FEMA never accomplished ever in the other communities. That was just one of their more famous activities was what they did.
One more thing, and that is there's ethical investment. And I mean, now it's $6 trillion, if I've got it correct. It's changing rapidly, globally, that is aimed at fossil fuel divestment. If we had a green bank, it was a clean green bank, not a, fracked green bank. If it was a clean green bank, it could attract that kind of ethical investment. And that's one reason why New York's green bank expanded so rapidly. In the second year that it was up, it's already asking for the $2 billion worth of investment. And that's divested money. So, why are we waiting? We really need to forge ahead. We need all the help we can get statewide.
But that relates to the question you had too, is like the original reason was there was a line I wouldn't cross. The original bill was natural gas was clean. No, it isn't. So you have to fight those battles.
There are many lines that you
exactly
ethical
exactly.
lines that
exactly.
you would want to look at.
I got three, you, and then in the back, and then
I just have a technical question of all three of you. There are recessions. The two banks, obviously, people who involved with them are investors, and they people are state. Even with common good, people with common good become investors until such time as the money in the bank is spent. Their money in the bank is spent. So if common good goes sideways for whatever reason, and I have $100 worth of something there, then I have become an investor there. So the question is, can you address the downside of all of what's going on here? What if there's a major recession and the state of Massachusetts loses large amounts of money because it's lent money out and the coverage factors are not sufficient to pay off?
You have to run a bank properly.
Well, you run a bank properly and you still have a recession. So how do you recession-proof, or do you? Or do you simply say this is a risk?
Well, in the case of North Dakota, the reason why the bank seemed to do well during the recession was because there wasn't a recession in North Dakota because fracking was expanding. That's one reason.
Right.
But the other reason was in part because of the public bank and its relationships with community banks in North Dakota and the relative lack of connection to the money center banks and the Wall Street banks. That also played a
Less
role.
vulnerable.
Right.
Can I ask, what happened to my sign-up sheet?
I have it here. I have it here.
With
Right
the
here.
Green Bank specifically, it would hopefully, the idea would be, which is obviously different than a public bank or company.
No, this.
But it would specifically, hopefully allow investment in renewable and green projects to continue. And so weather a recession, because the standards of returns would be different, and the long-term thinking ideally would also be.
And then it turns as a stimulus.
Exactly.
I guess, I guess touching on that, one person's point was, I guess recession-proof, I think about like the green banking, is there also, is part of the initiative to focus on, we think like green infrastructure, I think sometimes we think really big, but also when we talk about like worker co-ops or collective, that are doing worker co-ops and collective things that are, if Real Pickles wants to get a solar array or something like that, or those sorts of, the sorts of projects that would be considered. And then I guess the other question is, would this also be a bank potentially that like individuals, right? Because as an individual, I have a Bank of America account and I'd like to switch, but like from a convenience factor, they can switch from Bank of America and, I have DCU Digital Federal Credit Union where it's pretty convenient, but if I could invest in something, if I could take my money, and put it in a green bank, and then you've got a bunch of citizens in Massachusetts doing that, there's more capital and we're all putting in. So is that something that's a consideration.
That's my vision for it, is yes, is I want my money to be invested in a bank that is investing it where I want it to be invested. So invested a lot of times, but yeah, that is the ideal. It's like when I first got a banking account, I had telephone credit union. Because, all right, I'm a phone person, and this is great, and it's gonna give, if we're on strike, they're gonna continue to lend us money, that kind of thing. It's specialized to me. And at some point, even they got too big, and I think they're called Freedom now, and it's basically a bank. But yeah, that is the vision, is that I want control over where my money is going. And I don't have sufficient money to invest in real pickles, but boy, would I like to be part of an entity that does. Yes.
Our bank would not meet that need, because the model we're pursuing is that the only money deposited in the bank are public deposits, not individual or private deposits. And the only activity financed would be for public benefit. But on the financing end, yes, you could finance individual businesses and things like that. But you would only at the deposit end is just public deposits.
So this is speaking at a smaller scale than what we've been talking about for the past few minutes, but I just wanted to point out that one of the things I really like about the common good system is that it provides a transparent democratic framework for, that enables other community investment groups to use the platform. So for instance, I'm part of a neighborhood group that's collecting money from people who use air travel, like kind of collecting carbon offsets, right, and something like that. And then we're using it, we're keeping it in a shared common good account, and then reinvesting in sustainability projects that the people who contributed get to decide, you know, where that money goes. So that's ultimately what common good does, but it also enables like smaller scale versions of that.
That's great.
I'm still trying to find my clipboard with the...
I have it.
Oh, you have it. Thank you.
It's okay, it's all right. So, okay, we're moving on to lunchtime. So, one more?
Just like people are aware now that so-called natural, actually poison gas is not a clean fuel. Wood pellets are not a clean fuel, and we should not support subsidies or expansion of wood pellets. We see the old oaks in Wendell Forest being cut down for wood pellets. We see the denuding of the southeast and now the northeast for wood pellet export to Europe, where they have a very bad policy under the idea of ending climate chaos through burning our wood as wood pellets. So we have to stand against the cutting of trees in Massachusetts, especially on public land.
Okay, folks.
Safe transport.
All right, I think we're